Perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Ashley, they, them, and I'll be your friendly neighborhood NAGT support person today. I'm excited for today's webinar, but first we do have a few things to go over. The NAGT webinar series is a one-stop shop for increasing our community's capacity in Earth education. The webinars in our series feature novel and innovative work such as Earth education research and pedagogy, new teaching materials, and the classroom and professional experiences of people just like you. The NAGT webinar series is free and open to the public. We often get questions about whether it's okay to invite your colleagues. Yes, please do. We'd love to have them. And throughout the webinar, please use the chat box as a place for discussion, questions, and comments. And additionally, feel free to use the reactions tab. Otherwise, in terms of interacting with each other in this shared cyberspace, please remember that we do still follow the NAGT Code of Conduct, which expects and endorses a professional and respectful atmosphere and values diversity in creating an inclusive, supportive, and collaborative environment. I'll drop the link to the NAGT Code of Conduct in the chat once I'm finished with my little introduction. And our webinar today is entitled Strategies and Tools for Discovering Earth Education Resources Through Teach the Earth. And my colleague Sean Fox will walk us through the new Teach the Earth features that make finding undergraduate and K-12 classroom materials more efficient and effective. Take it away, Sean.
Great, thank you, Ashley. So just a little bit of an overview of what we're doing. I'm going to give you a little bit of perspective on what you can find through Teach the Earth. The title of the talk promised Teach the Earth as a frame for this, and we'll talk about what that means. We'll talk a little bit specifically about what sort of tools and affordances Teach the Earth has to help you find these Earth educator resources. Some of my sort of own take on what are some strategies that make best use of these tools, how to approach this process of finding materials in these large collections in a way that's going to feel satisfying. There'll be some time to test out and explore these on your own if you haven't already, and then I'll try to leave a lot of time for questions, either that arise from your own exploration or use of the tools, or just things that you've always wondered when you're using CERC materials, if you have before and want to know, and perhaps I can answer. So with that, I want to step back and just say a little bit about CERC because it's relevant for understanding the strategies I'm going to be talking about. So CERC is an office at Carleton College. We've been around for a couple decades, and our work is largely centered around projects where we collaborate with folks across the country on sort of independent projects, each of which is its own little grant-funded piece of work. As part of many of those projects, websites get created, and CERC usually ends up hosting those websites. So over the course of looks like 22 years now we've been in operation, we've ended up hosting about 100 different websites that have Earth education materials in them. And in aggregate, that means there's a lot of material that's there that's potentially useful to Earth educators. But with that sort of model of project-based development comes sort of a downside, which is if you are someone who's working directly with one of these projects, maybe they've reached out to you, you're attending their workshops, then the project website is really well structured to support that work. But if you're someone coming in who's perhaps not particularly interested in the project, but maybe interested in one of the resources they created, or maybe the project itself is over and the resources are hanging around and you just sort of want to mine them, you run into this problem that because we have all these independent project websites, each organized for their own purpose, it becomes more challenging to figure out where amongst all these 100 projects, the stuff that you might be interested in today is hiding. So that's sort of, it's a structural result of how this sort of work gets funded and generated. But it does mean that in many cases, you want to look in multiple projects and you may not know sort of where to start. And that's where Teach the Earth comes in. So Teach the Earth, you can think of as simply yet another project, but this one is a project whose goal is to help people with that exploration process across that set of 100 sites. So I think of Teach the Earth as really a portal with just a handful of pages that provide these tools that allow you to do this exploration. It's a way into this larger set of sites. So what do you find when you go to Teach the Earth? It's sort of a misnomer to say something is in Teach the Earth. It's more correct to say it's discoverable through Teach the Earth. As I said, most of what you'll find there are things developed by independent projects, each of which has their own sort of goals and perspectives and topical area they're focusing on and outcomes they're shooting for. And that drives what materials they create and what materials they've shared to the website. You also will find materials submitted by individual educators. We'll look in a minute. The Teach the Earth website has a mechanism where folks who have a good teaching activity they've developed with their students can submit it. That also becomes part of the pool that is explorable. And there's a few sort of other things in the big mix, but it's really the projects that dominate where this content is sitting. As far as topical scope, Teach the Earth is really focused on Earth education writ large. So we're not just focused on geology, but there's stuff on ecology and oceanography. Very broadly, anything teaching about the Earth might be in the Teach the Earth collection. And again, what you find in the Teach the Earth collection really is a reflection of what all those individual projects decided to focus on. So it's not attempting to have even coverage across every topic, even if there was a way to think about what that might mean. It's really a reflection of what the community has engaged in collaborative projects with CERC over the last 20 years. Similarly, that means the content spans grade levels. There's certainly K-12 materials. There's a lot of undergraduate materials, and there's other materials also aimed at other education levels, including informal ed. In terms of what you can find when you're working through Teach the Earth, teaching activities is the big one a lot of people come from, but there's also other information about academic careers or issues in higher ed. And the portal itself, this one project is co-run by CERC and NEGT, and there's the URL there. So what sort of tools are you going to find in Teach the Earth? One sort of challenge that I sort of already highlighted is the topic you may be interested in may actually be addressed in multiple projects. So one thing you'll find in Teach the Earth is a handpicked list of places to start amongst that set of project resources on a particular topic. And I'd like to think of this with a foraging metaphor. That is, that set of 100 projects and all the resources are a big forest or a set of ecosystems, and you're foraging for something good to eat. And it's not all set out there for you like a grocery store. You really have to do some digging around and sort of find places that are rich in the information, the food that you want to eat. So those handpicked lists of some good starting places, where in the forest might you find good blueberry patches, if that's the sort of thing you're interested in. Teach the Earth also has search interfaces, which provide sort of a bunch of different ways of slicing and dicing. Again, that full set of materials from across those 100 projects. There are also, Teach the Earth has tools that allow you to move across the forest, so to speak. That is from a resource you may have found deep in one project to a similar resource in another project. And those are tools that don't actually sit in the Teach the Earth portal site itself, but are embedded within the project sites. And finally, there are tools for keeping track of where you've been, because as you're jumping around, foraging amongst all these project websites, it's easy to get lost. So you need some wayfinding tools. So that's what's in Teach the Earth from a sort of an abstract view. What I'd like to do now is actually jump over and use some of these tools and talk through what this process is like in the concrete. So I'm going to switch my screen sharing, if I can do that, and start here with the Teach the Earth website. If people aren't seeing the Teach the Earth website there, let me know. Otherwise, I'll plunge ahead and assume that is the case. So this is the Teach the Earth front page if you haven't seen it. Just in terms of orienting yourself, there's some news and events over here on the right side. There are a set of community links if you want to know about people involved in engaging in all these projects that I talked about. There's actually a contribute link that if you have your own activity, you could click there and do that. And the bottom, there's a set of featured resources, which is really just oriented at the person who's new to Teach the Earth, who has no idea what this whole thing is about and wants some sort of taste of, well, what might I find through Teach the Earth? But I really want to focus on the top section. And I start with this Explore Themes area. And this gets back to what I talked to on an earlier slide, which is you have a particular topic in mind and you're asking yourself, where amongst all these projects can I find the resources on that topic? And that's exactly what these themes are. So if I click, for instance, on climate change, what I'll get is a list of 4 different places across all that set of 100 projects that we think are rich in resources around the topic of climate change. They're not the only places to find those, but they are good starting places. Likewise, if I'm interested in geohazards, I could click here and get a list of, here's a handful of places, again, from across the 100 projects that have collections or sets or are rich in geohazard related materials, and they're good places to start exploring. Each of these pop-up boxes also has at the bottom a search link, and that search link will do a search across all those 100 sites for all the individual resources that are related to that, in this case, hazards. If you click this link, you can see there are over 1,000 different individual things. They may be teaching activities or other sorts of resources that someone has decided are related to geohazards, and we've tagged them that way. So that's one good way into the whole collection to start finding those places that might be rich in the resources that you're looking for. There are similar links up at the top of the page, sort of high interest links. Again, these also have will jump you deep into projects where we think we have good resources. There are also a few things like this broadening participation in the geosciences link that actually takes you to an area within the Teach the Earth portal where we're covering how to broaden participation in the geosciences, in this case, from the perspective of all those Teach the Earth projects, and includes things like this browse, which actually we've identified all the resources across all 100 projects that have to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And we've collected them all here and in fact organized them around some themes. So if you're interested in that, you can start your exploration at that point. But what I'm going to do is just do what I think most people do, is just start from this search box, because people always love to type in a search box. And I'll imagine I'm searching for an activity. If you do so, I'd pay attention to this drop down here and narrow your search down to just activities, because that'll give you a slightly different search interface that's better for activities. And just hypothetically, let's say I'm interested in teaching about global warming. I could do a search on that. And you can see it gives me back the 562 things that are from across that set of 100 projects on global warming. Now, I want to throw a bit of a warning in here about using this text search. I've got global warming with 562 matches here. I could also search on climate change. And I want you to stop and think for a second. If I do this search on climate change, how many resources should come back? And I do the search and I get 3,000. So 3,000 is very different than 500, obviously. But yet climate change and global warming, while not exactly the same thing, are conceptually pretty close. And you'd imagine that most of the resources on the site that address climate change, you might plausibly say probably also touch on global warming, conceptually at least. And the thing that's going on here is the search engine is literally looking for words, in this case, that have pages that have the word climate change on them. And earlier it was looking for pages that had the words global warming on them. So it's doing a search on those literal words rather than the concepts. And the thing to keep in mind here is that's how it's working. So when you go searching and you get maybe five search results, that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't more resources across that set of sites that are about that topic. It just means those are the only ones those particular words show up on. So this is a core problem in search that you'll run into with search engines all over the place. And there's lots of attempts to try and fix this. And if you go on Google today and you do a search, you might find that it's giving back results that are actually more concept results rather than literal word matches. So that's something we're working on right now, is in taking advantage of the AI tools. Computers are traditionally really bad at being able to understand that climate change and global warming mean the same thing, unless a person literally goes in and tells it. But large language models, the sort of things that underpin ChatGPT, that's the thing they're actually good at. Realizing that climate change and global warming, those four words, two pairs of two words, are actually conceptually very close. So we're currently using some tools that are, in fact, everybody who's doing website search these days is exploring them, that allow us to do a little better in terms of giving you search results that match not just the literal words you're typing in, but also the concepts those words represent. But even once we get those in place, it's not going to be a perfect tool. So the thing to remember here is that search, just like all these other tools, is all about getting you to somewhere where you can start your exploration. They're trying to get you to good places where you want to start foraging. And you shouldn't expect to sit in the search interface, put in some search terms, click some boxes, and immediately narrow down to exactly the one activity that you want to use. Because likely you're going to be missing some things and you're better off taking this foraging model. So what does that look like? Let's do a different search in here because this is a little broad. Let's type erosion. So erosion gives us 500 matches. And my suggestion would be to start with these categories over here, search facets. Let's say, for instance, I know I'm teaching at the intro undergraduate course, and I can narrow myself down from 500 things to 350. And likewise, you can use these facets on the right to subset what you're looking at to smaller and smaller sets till you get something that's perhaps more manageable. The next facet down is this online readiness one that tells you whether these materials are, as presented, can be used immediately for online teaching or could be adapted, or really they're perhaps using some hands-on lab resources and they couldn't be used for online teaching. Again, another warning I want to put out for you. If you look at these numbers here, you'll see there are 63 that are online ready, 9 that are online adaptable, and 4 that are designed for in-person. But if you add up these numbers, 63, 9, and 4, you'll realize they're really different than 350. And that's because not all of the pages, not all of the 5,000 teaching activities across all those projects have been categorized by a human as to their online readiness. That online readiness categorization actually was developed in the spring of 2020 for reasons I think you can all imagine. And we actually recruited a bunch of volunteers from the community to help apply these tags to some of our best and heaviest used resources so that we had some collections that were discoverable by Online Ready. But the takeaway here is these facets, again, aren't going to be perfect at helping you hone in and see every activity, every resource that might match your need. They're a way to get started. So what does that getting started look like? In my mind, let's just jump in. I'm going to choose this first activity, erosion in a river. And now I've jumped, and the thing to realize is here, I've jumped from the Teach the Earth portal down into one of these project websites. So what might you do at this point? At this point, obviously, you might read the title, you might read the summary and figure out what this particular activity is about. You might scroll through it and ask yourself, is this something I want to use? But even if you decide this isn't something I want to use, I might also suggest figuring out the answer to the question, where am I? Right now, I'm in a project, and from the banner, I can see it's something called Get Spatial Learning. And my usual strategy with these is to look at the navigation menu on the left and go up to the top of it. That'll take us up to the top of this project website. And I can read the little introduction and figure out, where am I? What is this site about where this erosion in rivers activity is living? And if I read this, I'll find out this project was actually a work with cognitive psychologists and geoscience educators. And they were looking at how students learn spatial skills, and they were developing a bunch of tools and activities to support that. Now, perhaps I'm someone for whom that's super interesting, and I can now at this point just dig more into this project using the left navigation menu and just dig around. I might say, oh, they've got lots of teaching activities, and I like to, how are they teaching spatial learning skills? And I might look through these. I might search within this small set of activities they've got. But at this point, I understand that there's a site here, a project here about spatial learning. And even if it isn't what I need today, I now have in my head, hey, there's a whole set of resources about learning spatial skills that I might come back later if it's relevant to my teaching. And in fact, I see the activity that originally got me here, this erosion in the river ones, is right here at the list. But let's say perhaps I'm not entirely interested in that activity. I might just use my good old back button and jump back and start scrolling and look at some of these other activities. So I've foraged in that area. I've seen what the Get Spatial site is sort of about. I've decided it isn't for me today. Maybe it will be later. And I start scrolling through. I want to highlight this little green bar here that if I hover over, it gives me some text. This relates to the review process that gets applied to materials you might find in some of these 100 projects. There are a variety of these projects have engaged in activity review. And usually that's less about deciding whether things are in or out in the same way that a manuscript review might happen. You get reviewed and either you get published or you don't. In most cases, these reviews are about looking at activities that are already published on the site and deciding which one of these are exceptional and should we highlight. And so this little on the cutting edge exemplary collection logo is indicating that that particular activity went through a peer review process. They were reviewed against a rubric. You can learn more by following the link here. And some group of folks decided this was an exceptional activity, an exemplary activity. It is possible to just search through the exemplary activities. There's a link on the front page. There's one in the side menu here. But the thing to know is the search system's also aware of these review outcomes. So it will, in general, lift the better activities, better in terms of the review process, toward the top. So if you're just searching around normally, you'll almost always see the well-reviewed activities show up near the top of your search automatically. So you don't really need to go to any effort to find them, but just know that they're there, and that's what this little logo means. Let's imagine I'm looking through here, looking for titles that sound appealing. And I'm interested in this one, agricultural erosion rates. That sounds more like what I'm interested in teaching. Again, I jump to it. And again, I'm jumped from the Teach the Earth portal down into an individual project website. Again, I want to do a little orientation here. I want to figure out what is this activity about? And also, where am I? So again, I go to the left menu, I jump up to the top, and I can see with a little reading, this is actually part of a two-week module of teaching materials about soil resources. It has multiple units, and maybe that's something I'm really excited about, and I can dig further here. But maybe it's not. I can go back to the original activity. And now the question becomes, where do I go from here? Now, clearly, I could bop back to my original search, which had 500 some results, and I could keep plowing through there. But there are some other ways to move horizontally across this set of project resources. The first one I want to highlight is right here below the summary. So the summary is really interesting, really good for understanding what this page is about. The next box is about finding other things that are related. So if I can click here to expand this thing, and you get a list of topics. So these topics are some human has gone through and decided that this particular activity aligns with a category, and there's a whole giant set of categories, and it's in this particular one, someone has placed it in the land use and planning category and the soils and agriculture category and a couple of different soils categories. So that's nice and interesting, gives you some sense of what this page is about. But more powerfully, this is a Teach the Earth powered element, even though it's sitting here in the middle of a particular project website. And if I click on land use and planning, what I will get is a search return that includes all the things across the Teach the Earth collection, that is across that set of 100 websites that someone has tagged as land use and planning. So this is a way to jump from a place where I've been to other related materials along a different axis. In this case, along the axis of a particular topic that sounds interesting to me. I'll also point out that some of the materials we have alignment with next generation science standards. So if that's of interest to you, you can expand these and see what disciplinary core ideas this activity relates to. And you can see the cross-cutting concepts in the science and engineering practices and all those other good bits of NGSS there for you. So that's one way to move horizontally across from an activity outward rather than starting with a search. There's another even more powerful tool that I would encourage you to play with, and I'll give you some time to play with it later, and that's further down on the page. So this is a long activity with a lot of information. But down toward the bottom, you'll find this pages you might like section underneath the big blue bar. So the first item is always a daily feature, but everything else in this bar, and this is a scrollable list, there's quite a few things, are recommendations of other pages that have content that are related to the page you're on at the moment. So this is a set of recommendations. It's not personalized, it's specific to the page you're on. So these are all other activities that in some way relate, or other resources, pages, that some way relate to this existing page on, I don't remember what this page was on. It was on agricultural erosion rates. And things to know about these recommendations. They do make use of those topical vocabularies, but they also take another approach sort of in the mix, which is to ask the question, what words on the page that I'm currently on are unusual? That is, they're not found on very many other pages within the CERC collections. And then it asks the question, what other pages also have these unusual words? And it uses that information to decide as part of the decision of what to show in this recommender. So when you follow recommendations from this bar, you'll be making these horizontal jumps across projects to pages that have some often subtle but interesting relationship to the page you're on right now. And often these relationships are ones that complement the sort of things you'd find if you're using the topical organization that the box at the top did. So for instance, I can click this first link here, and it'll take me, again, now I'm in a completely different project. This one's a section of the site called oceanography. And again, I might take some time to look through and see if I'm really interested in oceanography as it relates to erosion rates, in this case, on sea cliffs. I might look through this collection. Again, there's this box up top where I can follow my bliss as far as what topic I might be actually interested in. If I find a topic that jumps out at me, I can skim the activity to see, hey, is this something I might actually want to use myself? And again, if not, I can go down to this pages you might like. And now I've got a bunch of pages that in some way relate to the page I'm on. This recommendation bar, the pages you might like, is also designed to be biased toward resources that are far away from where I am right now. So for instance, I'm in this area about oceanography. I can imagine that if I go to this oceanography teaching activities collection, there are going to be a lot of pages that are somewhat related to this page here that I was on. But if that's the case, if I really am interested in oceanography activities, that's the way to go. But if I'm not so much interested specifically in this project, but I am interested in this erosion topic, the pages you might like will often jump you to places that are more far afield that you might not have been able to easily identify any other way. I'm just going to jump and follow and see what this is. So this is, again, a completely different project. These are some geomorphology vignettes that were put together to support a textbook. And again, I can look at this project. If I'm into geomorph, I can check this out some more, or maybe, again, just follow my bliss and jump to a different place based on the recommenders. So I'd really suggest spending some time just following leads, following your nose, foraging via that recommender link at the bottom, because you'll find all sorts of connections that weren't obvious, even if you're someone who's really familiar with a lot of the stuff on the site. So you've done all this foraging around, you followed those recommenders, you've gone a million places, and now you're entirely disoriented, right? Where was I? Where was that? A few minutes ago, I was on a page about spatial learning. And really, now that I think about it, that activity is probably the thing I want to use. How do I get back there? I've been using the back button judiciously, and that's always a good strategy. But there's another tool you can play with, and that is down at the bottom of every page, below that set of recommendations, there's a Where I've Been bar. And the Where I've Been bar is basically just tracking as you move around across all these 100 project websites. Where have you been? And you can jump back to any place you've been. You can see it keeps track of history a ways back. Oh, and wait a minute, and there is that erosion in a river page I landed at originally, and I can jump back there immediately. So that Where I've Been bar is a good way to orient yourself. You'll also note that in addition to showing you the particular pages that you are at, it has labels for what project you are in. So this is a good way to start to get a sense of what projects might be of more interest to you. So for instance, I see I've in a lot of projects related to cutting edge. I might just click this and get to the cutting edge project overall and maybe check that out. So again, this is another tool that both help you understand where you've been, but also supports your building some understanding of what are the places that I might explore further. Now, this does have some limitations. It only keeps track of the 50 most recent places you visited. And it's tied to the particular browser you happen to be using. So there is another tool that you can use to help you track stuff. And that's found in the upper right-hand corner. There's an account link there. Using this tool requires you to be logged into a Circ account. If you don't have one, you can click that link in the upper right. It'll let you create one or log in if you're not currently logged in. But if you're logged in, you can do what I'm going to do and just click it. And let's say I want this erosion and river, I want to use this erosion river record. I want to remember it for later. I can click Add Current Page. I can maybe make a note in the title, Use on Thursday. Add it to my favorites. Then when I'm off somewhere else, I can always go back to this menu and find that activity that I put on my favorites at any point earlier. Again, this travels with your Circ account. So anytime you log into your Circ account in any computer, you'll be able to get to those set of favorites that you've saved. And this is obviously very much like a set of browser bookmarks if you use browser bookmarks. And if you're a really heavy browser bookmark user, maybe you want to stick with those. This does have the advantage that it's just constrained to the set of materials from the site, which if your bookmarks have gotten out of control, that might be handy. But it also has a couple other features that are important to note. One is you can organize your pages into collections. So for instance, let's imagine I'm making an online hydrology course. In this case, I've gone through that foraging process. I've identified some things and I've added a bunch of different links for my hydrology course. And now I've got them all grouped there for use later. Or here's another collection around climate labs. When you're adding pages, you can just choose to put them in a collection or even add a new collection right there. But the most powerful thing, and the thing your bookmarks really won't be able to do in your browser, is this checkbox right here. Let's say I really like this erosion in a river activity. I've used it with my students, used it every year as part of a course. If I check this box and add this to my favorites now, if the author comes back to this page and makes some updates, maybe they put some more data in or revise it some way, I'll get an email notification saying, hey, the erosion in the river activity has been updated. And then I get the option to go back and check it and see if I want to use those updates in my class with my students. So this is a really powerful feature that you'll want to keep in mind, a way to keep track of when materials that you've already adopted and are that are important to you get updates when they are updated. And that includes not only updates by the original author who may update the activity. There is a new community contribution tool feature, which I won't talk more about here, but it allows folks who've used the activity and want to share back with the community what they've learned to share that directly through the page. And if you check that box, you'll get notified about those as well. One further feature that's part of the favorites, I'm not going to add this to my favorites again, but you can go to manage favorites and you can see here are my favorites. They're organized into collections. I can reorganize them and change the titles. I can add notes on them if there's something I want to remember about this. It's also possible to make your collections public. So here's my collection on online hydrology course information. And I can just go in here and say, make this collection public. Oh, it's not, and hit save. And now I've got a public link that I can share with my friends or my students or folks in a faculty group. Here's a set of resources I found. I certainly haven't thought of all the possible uses for this sort of public collection link, but I imagine people can be pretty creative with that. So this is a feature that's relatively new, this ability to make things into collections, put them in your favorites, and also to make that link public. If you go there, here's what the link looks like. You could go to this link right now if you wanted, and you would see the same thing. You can see the URLs, the pages I've collected, and any notes that I've made along the way about the web pages, anything sort of I want to say whatsoever. So that is a whirlwind tour of a whole bunch of features. I'm again going to switch my screen sharing back to the PowerPoint and talk a little bit about strategies. And really what I'm going to do is reiterate the strategies that I've already talked through as I did the sort of hands-on demo there. First, the obvious one, starting to Teach the Earth gives you a whole bunch of tools to explore with. We want to follow this foraging strategy where we know that our goal is to find a particular project or parts of projects that are rich in the sorts of resources that I'm interested in and do some local exploration. Noting that the topic list on the front of the Teach the Earth page is one way to get into those locations. And the other way is to use search or any other interfaces. And then when you get to a page, ask the question, where am I? What is this project about? Are there more things in this area that might also be of interest to me? You want to make use of those tools that allow you to jump from one page that is close to what you want, but not quite, to other pages, both that topic box up near the top of the page and the pages you might like recommender at the bottom of the page. You can certainly use search, but you want to keep in mind those limitations. That is, if you're using those facets on the side, it may be that there are resources relevant to you that simply haven't been categorized according to a particular facet, so they might not show up. And also that if you're doing text search, you're really searching, trying to match words on a page and not concepts. So again, that might cause you to overlook something that might otherwise be useful. If you understand that limitation and you're just comfortable working with it, you'll feel a lot better than doing some text searches and wondering, why can't I find the thing I found yesterday? Because if you want to find the thing you found yesterday, the best way to do that is to use some of these tools we talked about. That is the Where I've Been feature, or using favorites to keep track of and monitor pages that are of high interest to you, that have activities you've used or resources you want to keep track of. So with that, I'm going to give us, say, 7 minutes to explore on your own. I'm just going to turn off my mic and screen and give people time. And the assignment is this: think about something that you'd like to find for your own use. Start from the Teach the Earth front page. The URL is there, and I'm sure somebody will throw it in the chat soon. Actually, it's already in the chat, I can see. Try using some of these features that we talked about. In particular, play with clicking on the recommendation bar and sort of get a sense of where it shows you. See what that impact has on the Where I've Been bar, and collect questions, because I want to leave a good chunk of time for questions at the end. You may have questions that arise in using these tools. How do I use them better? Or you just may have questions about how all this stuff at Circ is organized. Maybe you've used it a lot, but there's something that's always been bugging you about why doesn't it work this way, or why am I seeing this, or where to find X. And I'm happy to answer all those sorts of questions. So let's take 7 minutes. It's now by my clock, 37 minutes after the hour. So 7 minutes puts us at 44 minutes to the hour. We'll come back and do some Q&A. Okay, Ashley, if you get the recording started up again, looks like we're going.
Yep.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had fun exploring. Let's take a few minutes and do some questions. It's a really small group here, so if you're welcome to use the chat, but if you want to just unmute and talk, we're a small group and there's no reason that can't work.
Well, you know, I look at Circ pages every day, and I have probably slid my eyes over the favorites section like virtually every day, like 16 times, and I'd never interrogated it before. So that's really cool. I mean, so I added some stuff to it. That was
Cool.
what I mostly worked on. Yeah, that was cool. And the I guess so. I didn't guess I had any questions about it. I guess maybe I would just say, like, how long do you get uptake on that? Do you have follow the users on that at all? Like,
Gotcha.
how
That's
much
a great
people are
question.
doing it?
So we've had a favorites feature of some sort for many years, but it was unadvertised and wasn't particularly effective. Didn't work real reliably. So that the sort of current implementation is new as of the last 3 or 4 months. So we're really just starting to get the word out about, hey, it's out there. And in particular, the ability to make collections, the ability to share them, the ability to get notifications. It's all pretty new. So I have not looked. I suspect there are very few people who've actually dug into it very far, mostly because we haven't advertised it much. But we're going to be doing that more going forward, and have some ideas about how we can both get the word out and come up with some creative ways for people might use it.
Cool.
Gail, Marta, anything in your explorations that you saw that raised questions, or anything else we can tell you about? Well, if not, I think we will wrap this up. And I guess I'll turn it over to Ashley if there are any sort of closing things we need to do from the NHG webinar perspective. And you're muted.
Oops, I am muted. There we go. I added the closing slide to your slide deck. Sean, could you share that for me, please? Thank you so much. And thank you for a wonderful webinar. And thank you everyone who joined us today as well. If you'd like an email certifying that you attended today, please complete the evaluation survey, and that will link you to the form to get that email. I'll drop that in the chat right now. Let's make sure I grab the right link. I have a bunch of them in my little script here. There we go. You'll also be able to find the resources and recording from today's webinar on the webinar page. Just give us a little bit of time. We do send the recording out for processing and captioning. Also, please join us for our next webinar on Saturday, November 16th. It's the Outstanding Earth Science Teacher Awardee Virtual Share-a-thon. And that'll be 2 hours And if you're not registered, you can go ahead and register for that now. And finally, there's also a link on this page in the middle there where you can find the webinar schedule, the archive of past webinars, and information about our sponsoring projects and programs. Thank you everyone for attending today, and I look forward to our next webinar.